Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. The debate over the debates continues after last night's vice presidential matchup in Utah. It began this morning when the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates announced next Thursday's event was going virtual as President Trump battles the coronavirus at the White House. But Mr. Trump quickly refused to participate virtually, calling the change a sad excuse. Instead, he may host an in-person rally instead, going against science and claiming he's no longer contagious.
I'm not going to waste my time on a virtual debate. That's not what debating's all about. You sit behind a computer and do a debate. It's ridiculous. I don't think I'm contagious at all. Well, first of all, if I'm at a rally, I stand by myself very far away from everybody, so whether I was or not. But I still wouldn't go to a rally if I was contagious.
It is worth noting that this would not be the first remote presidential debate in U.S. history. In 1960, Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy debated from across the country. Instead of going to next week's debate, Democratic nominee Joe Biden will host a town hall with ABC in Philadelphia. His campaign initially welcomed the virtual debate, but said if President Trump won't participate, it should be pushed a week to October 22nd. The Biden camp accused President Trump of trying to avoid direct questions from voters. Here's how the former VP responded at a campaign stop in Arizona.
It's not surprising. I mean, I'll ask a rhetorical question none of you can answer. Were any of you surprised? I mean, who knows? Look, we agreed to 3 debates back in the summer. This has been going on since the early 90s. First debate, person to person. Second debate, town hall format. Third debate, person to person. We set the dates. I'm sticking with the dates. I'm showing up. I'll be there. And in fact, if he shows up, fine. If he doesn't, fine.
Caitlin Huey-Burns and Anita Kumar join me now. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter with us from Salt Lake City after last night's debate. And Anita is a White House correspondent and associate editor for Politico. Welcome to you both. Anita, let me begin with you. The CDC says that a person can remain contagious from 10 to 20 days after symptoms appear, depending on the severity of each person's illness. So why not virtually debate?
The president has never been interested in that. Last week, when we sort of wondered if it would go this way, if the commission would do this, I had talked to a lot of people that are close to the president that said he just wouldn't want to do that. And for a couple reasons. One, he just doesn't get to be as aggressive when he's not in person. He doesn't get to have that back and forth like he likes to have. The other reason is, if you recall, there was all that talk about whether there should be a button to try to stop him from talking when he's interrupting, and he was not in favor of that. He is afraid that if they do this, they would be able to cut him off whenever they want. So for those logistical reasons, he doesn't like it. It also sends a different message than he wants to send. He wants to send a message that America should be open. People should be back doing things in person, just like he's been doing for weeks now, talking about it for months. And this would send a completely different message than that.
All right, so speaking of messages, Caitlin, President Trump and the administration say that they are following medical advice in their actions during this pandemic. But the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports that Chief of Staff Mark Meadows hosted a 70-person wedding in Atlanta for his daughter in May. At the time, Georgia's cap on gatherings was 10 people, set by the Republican governor. So what message does that send to the country?
Well, it's consistent with the behaviors of the White House over the course of this pandemic, not following and flouting CDC guidelines. And this is one example of it, and a reason why, of course, several members of the White House staff have been testing positive for coronavirus. It was also interesting to hear at the debate last night when Vice President Pence, who's head of the coronavirus task force, was asked point blank, how can you expect people to follow CDC guidelines and do what's right if your own White House is not following them? And Pence didn't answer the question. Instead, he pivoted to talking about the Supreme Court. And that, I think, kind of shows you how this White House and administration has been responding to this.
Yeah, no, the evasiveness there really kind of speaks volumes. Let me also ask you, Anita, interestingly, about Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, because he said this afternoon he hasn't been to the White House in 2 months because of how they handle the virus, saying, quote, "My impression was their approach to how to handle this was different than mine, and what I insisted that we do in the Senate, which is to wear a mask and practice social distancing." What did you make of those comments? Because oftentimes the Senate Majority Leader, as you know, is on the same page as the White House, but not so clearly on this particular issue.
Yeah, I thought it was very striking, both because they aren't on the same page, but also that he decided to say something about it. So oftentimes, we'll see that Republicans disagree with the president on something, but they keep quiet about it. They just don't comment. They don't say anything. And he did say something. So I thought that was very striking. But, there are differences in what's happening in the White House and over at the Capitol. Now, there are a lot of people at the Capitol that would say things do not go far enough there, but it is different than at the White House until very recently. And I know I've been over there, the staff wasn't wearing masks, even though initially months ago they were told to do so. It got really relaxed. If you were a visitor coming in or a staffer coming in, you had to have a temperature check. Well, that fell by the wayside quite a while ago. So, there are some differences. We've seen the social distancing issue not being followed at the White House. And perhaps the Senate Majority Leader felt like he could say it now that we're seeing so many staffers and visitors that have tested positive. It's clear that there is a problem at the White House, and it's clear that they, if they want to keep people safe, need to change the way they're doing things.
I just want to follow up with you, Anita, on this, because it's something that I don't think most viewers might understand in terms of the size of the West Wing and some of those offices. Can you just explain how tightly cramped, actually, the West Wing is as a whole? I remember covering the White House, and folks who would come in for tours would walk into that briefing room and go, "Is this it?" And they would really be surprised at just how small it is. And the door that we see when the members of the president's press staff come out, that opens into the press area. But it is, even just because of the layout, very difficult to maintain any sense of social distance.
Yeah, I mean, it's a historic and beautiful building, no doubt about it. But when people visit, you are correct. They look at it and think, this is it. Inside, it's quite cramped. Now, we're not talking about these beautiful rooms that you see, maybe in the movies, right, or in Christmas parties, or, that sort of thing. We're talking about the working part of the White House, so the West Wing, as you mentioned. Not only is it very cramped, it's very old. I mean, they're just not places to maneuver. There's not some of this modern, modern spacing. So it's cramped. People share space. I'm not just talking about reporters. I'm talking about the press staff, but also the reporters share space. And it's very small. What people don't really understand is that next door is the Eisenhower Executive Office building right next door. Mm-hmm. And there are many White House staffers that are called White House staffers that actually have their offices there because there's just simply no room for them. And so there isn't a lot of social distancing. And when people don't wear masks there, they're popping into their offices, but also in the corridors. They can't not be next to each other because it's that small. So, I mean, it is very striking. The Capitol, by comparison, there's all sorts of places to go, and there's just much more room over there.
Yeah, no, I think it's just helpful for folks because they may not realize, based on the Hollywood portrayals of what the West Wing is imagined to look like, but the reality, as you point out, is something very different. Caitlin, let me ask you, the New England Journal of Medicine, a highly regarded medical journal, published their first ever political editorial in 208 years, calling for the country's leadership to be voted out over their handling of the pandemic. How significant is the pandemic in this election?
It's incredibly significant, and it is shaping the outlines of this race. It was quite literally front and center stage at the debate here in Salt Lake City last night because of the plexiglass dividing Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, the vice presidential candidates. It shows that 7 months into this, a pandemic is still very much raging on. I'm wearing a mask right now. The economic crisis as a result of the pandemic is still very much raging on. And we've seen in our polling that this is something that is on the top of minds for voters. And voters are giving the president and the Trump administration negative grades on the handling of coronavirus, and that's overshadowing everything else. We heard in the debate last night attempts by Mike Pence to try to pivot the conversation away from the pandemic because he knows, the Trump campaign knows, it's not a winning issue, trying to pivot away from that and towards the economy and trying to remind people about what the economy looked like before the pandemic. Well, in polling, we see that while oftentimes Trump still leads on the economy, people's feelings about the pandemic and the Trump administration's handling of it override any positive that they would give him on the economy. And so this really shows how this is shaping this race, shaping it up to be a referendum on Trump's handling of coronavirus. And that's why you saw at the debate last night, it was not only at center stage physically, but also a big topic of discussion and something that the Biden campaign wants to keep front and center.
Well, Anita, your colleague Dan Diamond, meantime, is reporting that health officials are scrambling to produce President Trump's drug discount cards by Election Day. What exactly would these cards do? Why are they rushing to get them out?
Right. These are for Medicare patients, and it's something that the administration has talked about for a while, but didn't come to fruition until just a couple weeks ago. Now, here we are at, early October, and the election is, less than 30 days away. And the administration is really pushing, if these cards, these discount cards, can't be out, then they at least want a letter to go to all the recipients that would get a card to say, you will be getting this card. Obviously, they want the credit for this. They want it to be something that, people are looking at and saying, look, the Trump administration did something for me, did well for me. They want it to be something that that they might think about when they go to the vote, when they go to vote on November 3rd. The administration, I will say, is saying it's not political at all. This is something that would be good, and they want to do it. But I will just tell you that there is a pattern. There has been a pattern for almost 4 years, but I would say particularly this year in 2020, where the administration is trying to push out different things to bolster the president before the election. The administration says they're not political, but if you'll recall back when the stimulus checks were going out to all of, most Americans, the president wanted his signature on the check, or he wanted to send a letter. So people are calling these Trump cards. They look like credit cards, and they're saying, oh, it's going to be something else just like those letters. It might even have his name on it where he wants to get some of this credit. So I do think that, there's obviously policy behind all of these issues, but there's some politics there too.
Well, Caitlin, during her weekly press conference today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she'll be speaking tomorrow about the 25th Amendment. What exactly could that mean?
That's right. We're waiting to see what she means by that and what she will say about that tomorrow. But the 25th Amendment has to do with the transition of power if a president is incapacitated in some form. Of course, that has been a big issue of discussion over the past several days, given that the president was hospitalized for coronavirus. And that placed a bigger spotlight, of course, on the vice presidential candidates and why we were all tuning in to this debate last night. At that debate last night, both candidates, Kamala Harris and Mike Pence, were asked if they've had that conversation with the tops of their tickets, with Biden and Donald Trump, not only given that the pandemic is a major threat to them, but also that these two are the oldest candidates that we've seen. If inaugurated, Joe Biden would be, if elected and inaugurated, Joe Biden would be the oldest president that we've had. And so this is an issue that is front and center, this issue of transitions. And so we'll see what she means by that tomorrow. But that's what the focus has been over the past few days.
All right, we will be following that closely. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Anita Kumar, it has been an extremely long week, but it is wonderful to see you both. Thanks so much.
Thanks.